Hey there, my name is Alex, I'm the Silver Mont, and this video is about 5 more unsolved Souls lore mysteries, as you guys seem to like the last one I did and had a lot of good suggestions. This time around I've gone for a bit of a theme for the 5 mysteries. The Abyss. I don't mean that in the Dark Souls literal abyss where you find Manus, but rather more figuratively, a chasm of immeasurable depth and darkness, especially those to do with the sea or under the sea, and to look at it even more subjectively, endless spaces. As to which, let's get right into it with our first mystery. Ash Lake. I spoke a little about this in the last video when we were talking about arch trees and how they are a common theme amongst the games, or at least not arch trees, but big trees and their equivalents. But I didn't talk specifically about Ash Lake. It's one of my favourite areas in all of the Souls games, but even so it isn't our first example of a space like this. The ending of Demon Souls takes place in a space, with Ash Lake abyssal qualities, deep beneath the Nexus. We don't really get to explore it, but it is there. Still, Ash Lake is one of those moments that most people who play Dark Souls will never forget about. Hidden away in a corner of the map, accessed through a vertical hell of tree branches, hidden behind multiple secret walls. Your reward for getting through all that? A vast, empty space of haunting music and beauty. Some people find Ash Lake beautiful, some people find it scary. Either way, you can catch glimpses of Ash Lake from other areas, which only adds to its appeal. But the area is comparatively large and empty. Its size is further exaggerated by the skybox, if we can call it that, which stretches out seemingly in all directions to the horizon. There's nothing quite like it in Dark Souls. So often are the areas claustrophobic and closed off, rarely opening up in the first game. Narrow, twisting passages, and even the more open areas, such as the forest, feel claustrophobic thanks to the lighting, the fog, and the densely packed trees. Whilst Ash Lake is far from dark, its vast size and depth, both its literal depth in the game world and the depths of water that surround it, certainly give it some abyssal qualities. In Ash Lake we find a hydra, some mysterious giant skulls, various assorted enemy types, the end of the Onion Knight's quest, as well as what appears to be a surviving or descendant of the ancient dragons, leader of the well-hidden Dragon Covenant. But what is Ash Lake? Well, the land, which appears to be a white beach, is presumably the ash. Fire begets ash. Does that mean the Age of Fire's ash formed the lake? Is it the remnant of a time long past, Gwyn's kingdom built atop it? Commonly held theory is that the opening cinematic shows us Ash Lake, and it certainly has a very strong resemblance with all the arch trees, only there's no water so far as I can see. The lighting is very different, but the bigger point to me is the lack of water. And it is this abyssal water that intrigues me. Did this deep sea not exist in the Age of Ancients? Are there any connections between it and the actual Abyss? Well, we'll touch more on that soon. But the Abyss, well, that leads us into our second point, the primordial serpents, Karth and Frampt specifically. I'm sure they need no introduction. There are more than just 2 of them as seen in one of the Dark Souls endings, but what are they? If serpents are imperfect dragons, what does that make Frampt? Are they descendants of the ancient dragons? Are they cousins of the ancient dragons? They surely have some connection because they are called primordial serpents, and the game does make a point of explaining how serpents and dragons are connected. They are seemingly immortal and reach up from dark places. Are they 2 heads of the same body, as some people speculate? Do they even have a body? If you followed Frampt's neck all the way to the other end, what would you find? Would you find Karth? Would you find some sort of sphere with many other necks coming out of it? Would it just go on and on forever, wrapping around the whole world back on itself? a world serpent. While their influence reaches throughout the trilogy, felt most keenly in the first game, but they make somewhat appearances in the third, coincidentally as statues, with wings. Uria mentions Karth by name. Whilst Framp skulls seem much the same, Karths seem to have shifted somewhat to the usurpation of fire, which you can argue is the same eventual goal, just arriving at it from a new perspective. Unfortunately, we never had any answers in regards to the serpents. Perhaps in an earlier draft of Dark Souls 3, we would have had some. But right now, it's a question we'll never have answered, unless they make a Dark Souls 4 one day. Arguably, the primordial serpents are one of the largest mysteries often hinted at, but never revealed. Which leads us to the Darklurker, another denizen of the Abyss, which we know virtually nothing about. It is able to split itself in two. It has the form of a somewhat angelic human, and is able to use fire and magic. The dark chasm of old is the remnant of some ancient, dissipated being. One could argue that Darklurker is some remnant of Manus. The shards of the Father of the Abyss feature prominently in Dark Souls 2 after all. Whilst Darklurker is certainly connected to the Abyss, the almost complete lack of information regarding him could mean anything. For all we know, he's just an Easter egg, secret boss, and they didn't think too much about it. And that brings me to Dark Souls 3, and the sea, another abyss. What was it they said in Bloodborne? A bottomless curse, bottomless sea, accepting of all there is and can be. Now, keeping in mind what we discussed earlier in regards to Ash Lake, water, the sea, and the abyss, Dark Souls 3 gave us a bit of a curveball in some ways by mentioning the deep. When Aldrich ruminated on the fading of the fire, it inspired visions of a coming age of the deep sea. Dregs are the heaviest things within the human body and will sink to the lowest depths imaginable, where they become the shackles that bind this world. There is a darkness that lies beyond human ken. It appears by the time of Dark Souls 3, a darkness in humanoids can stagnate and become something heavier and new. Humanity has always been heavy, but over the many cycles, many years, many ages, something has changed by the time of Dark Souls 3. Aldrich's Age of the Deep Sea almost implies that in lieu of, or perhaps in addition to, ash gathering at the base of the world, so too is dark, forming a sort of deep, dark sea. To put it another way, if Ash Lake's ash comes from, say, the kindling of flames, what happens to the humanity that is burned in the bonfires? What about the dregs of humanity, dense and thick? Does it gather at the base of the world in the dark waters of Ash Lake, giving birth to a new form of dark, a new abyss that is rising toward the surface, maybe threatening to overspill onto the world? Who knows? Finally, moving from the subterrane of Dark Souls, we have Elden Ring, the Shifra River, and other underground areas. Ruins of ancient civilizations exist here, but were they simply buried? What relation and connection have they with the surface world? Some of these we have some answers for. For example, some appear to have sunk into the ground. Liurnia, for example, is gradually sinking, and we all know what lurks deep beneath Liurnia, the Lake of Rot. There are a multitude of mysteries about the underground, but the one I'm most keen on is perhaps also one of the most mundane and maybe easily explained. The stars of the underground, the constellations. These are presumably natural formations in these immense caverns, shards of glintstone perhaps that are on the ceiling of the cavern, glinting merrily like stars in the night sky. And yet they even appear to be forming constellations and nebulas, and given everything we know about the great beyond, the stars in Elden Ring and their connection with places like Noxtella and the other Eternal Cities, did they create these stars? Long ago, the Nox invoked the ire of the Greater Will and were banished deep underground. Now they live under a false night sky, in eternal anticipation of their liege, of the coming age of the stars, and their Lord of Night. Who is the Lord of Night? Is this false sky an added punishment, or did they create it themselves? They can't see the real stars, did they make themselves a false night sky? I suppose compared to some of the other points, we have a lot more possible answers to this particular mystery. Nothing concrete, but there are good theories that we can work around with. At any rate, thank you so much for watching, and if there's any other unsolved or partially solved mysteries in Dark Souls, Elden Ring, Bloodborne, any of these titles, let me know down in the comments. Till next time, take care, have a good one, ciao.